So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Some of you may know him, some of you may not, but I'm going to give you a little background on him. He's expansive, so let me get started. Daniel Terhorst-North uses his deep technical and operational knowledge to help business and technology leaders to optimize technology organizations. He puts people first and finds simple, pragmatic solutions to business and technical problems, often using team and agile techniques. With 30 years, really? You look young. Okay, with 30 years of experience in IT, Daniel is a frequent speaker at technology and business conferences worldwide. The originator of behavior-driven development and deliberate discovery, Dan has published feature articles in numerous software and business publications and contributed to the R-Spec book, Behavior-Driven Development, and R-Spec Cucumber, and Friends, and 97 Things Every Programmer Should Know. Listen, guys, I'm not IT at all. You know, I'm just the MC here, but I'm trying to understand all of this. It's not my stage, it's his stage. Let me get him up here. Collective wisdom and experts. He occasionally blogs at, is that going to be up here, or should I read it out? Read it out? No, he's going to put it up. He's going to put it up on a slide where he blogs. Please welcome on stage Daniel Terhorst-North.
Thank you, King John.
Thanks for making this fun for me.
Thank you, King John. Thank you for inviting me to your kingdom.
Before I let you get started, one quick question. As you know, CraftHub is 10 years old this year, and we started from nothing, and we grew it into this. So this is a very big event for us. We have lots of sponsors. We have lots of speakers that do really well. So my question is, for a young person starting off as a programmer or assistant engineer, given the rapidly changing IT world that there is, with your vast experience, what advice would you give them?
I want to qualify the question slightly, because you don't have to be that young to be starting out in technology. I know people in their 40s and even older, in their 50s, who have just decided to switch tack into technology. So come on in, the water's lovely. What I say to newer people into the industry, particularly younger people early in their career, is it doesn't matter what you do. As long as it's ethically not bad, you can't. Try all the things. Try all the things, find out what you like. I had no idea what I like, right? It took me, I've hopped around between domains, between technologies, between organizations. I've worked in companies, I've done consulting. I describe my 30-odd year career as just a series of happy accidents, right? And I actually did a talk a few years ago with a wonderful, wonderful lady called Trisha G, who's the opposite. She's like the most planned career person ever. I want to do this job in 5 years, so that for the next 2 years I need to learn this thing and then that. And we had this conversation where we realized that we had these polar opposite approaches and they both work. So we did this lovely joint talk about the fact, especially kids, try loads of things. There are no bad choices, okay? And then eventually you'll find out what you like to do, and hopefully one day you'll end up working with someone like Randy Sharp and having a brilliant time. So that's my advice for new people. Okay, so I want to talk about a talk. This is going to get a bit meta. Around last October, I think it was, I was at a little conference in London about enterprise agility. And I tend not to drop the A word that much these days, because it means so many things. I also don't talk about post-agile or agile is dead or agile, because unfortunately agile ended up meaning whatever you want it to mean. So I, in my head, have a very clear understanding of what agility is, and it turns out that you can't build a billion-dollar certification Ponzi scheme out of that, so we had to do a different thing. So this business agility, then, is the ability of an organization to respond to feedback quickly, and hopefully in a good way. And I gave this talk. So the way I want to introduce this talk is by giving this talk, and then I want to tell you what happened next. So the point of this How to Bake a Change is I've been in the tech space for about 30-something years now. And great skin, right? But 30-something years, and the last probably 10, 15 of those, specifically helping big organizations and little organizations go faster. So the thing I do is I go and help organizations go faster. And that can be technical stuff, organization stuff, leadership stuff, people stuff. And so what I wanted to do was try and condense down that into just some advice I can offer. And kind of why it isn't, implement safe. You have a problem, you implement safe, now you have two problems, right? In fact, probably several problems, at least one of which. Anyway, so here's what I do. So I'm trying to kind of bake in what I do. And I'm using this metaphor of cooking, of baking. So here's what I do. And I know this is going to sound really counterintuitive, but I start with what the customer, what the client, what they're trying to get done. And it turns out that's a differentiator, right? Because if you've got a big consultancy and they do a thing, their job is to come in and implement the thing. Jerry Weinberg, the kind of the granddaddy of consulting, he calls this solutioneering. So you have a solution and you go and you just implement the solution. Doesn't matter what the problem is. So I do this really crazy countercultural thing of trying to find out what the problem is in the first place. And by and large, you have this sort of duality thing. The first part is about baking the cake right. So this is product development. This is how we do work. But baking the cake right sits inside of a larger thing, which is baking the right cake. Okay? And we call that product management. Most of what I do is product development. It's the operational side. It's how we do work. I have very good friends who do the, are we baking the right cake in the first place? I talk a good product game, but I wouldn't come to me for product management advice. I come to people I know, and I'll happily introduce you and get out of the way, right? So to give you an idea of how these two things kind of live as a duality, baking the cake right tends to come down to better, faster, cheaper, right? It tends to come down to how we're doing work. So they say we want to ship faster. Well, it's really easy to ship faster, right? Just throw out all of the safeties, throw out all of the checks. No. The question behind the question is we want to ship faster without cutting corners. That's much harder, right? There's water, this is great, there's water dripping down here, but it's about just far enough in front of a lot of very expensive electronics right here. So if at some point this whole thing just explodes, okay, in a puff of smoke, it'll at least be a brilliant end to a talk. So there's that. So ship faster. Something else I hear, we want to spend less, especially in the current economy. How do we spend less? And again, it's really easy to spend less. Just lay off loads of people. But then, I use this metaphor of like, we want to spend less, we want to trim fat, we don't want to chop our leg off. Right? Both are ways to lose weight. One of them is going to kill you. Yeah? So how do you spend less without hurting performance? I was working with one client for a long time, and they just suddenly terminated everything. Yeah, I had a long-standing relationship with them, and clearly from up on high, someone had said, just get rid of all the vendors. Like, what about the vendors who are saving you money? No, all of them. Yeah? And so you see these kind of edicts coming out. And the third thing I hear again is improve quality. Of course we want to improve quality, but the question behind the question, without adding loads of process and stuff and time and delays, and see earlier point of ship faster. So again, the surface level versions of these questions look pretty obvious, but when you look at the question behind the question, it gets a lot more interesting, right? And then the flip side, baking the right cake. And all of this is I think of all of this in terms of like a target. So the first thing is finding the target, right? So understand your customer, understand customer needs. This is all the wonderful like theory of jobs to be done, product market fit, all of that stuff that product people are brilliant at, that I can talk a good game at. I've done a bit of, but I wouldn't come to me for that advice, right? Then there's hit the target. Okay, so now we understand what the need is, and we've articulated that need, and we've maybe tested that need. Now we start to think about what would a product look like that meets that need. I'm quite good at that. Okay, and the third bit, and this is again the unspoken bit, stay on target. Okay, the world will move. Okay, at one point, BlackBerry was the phone to have. The world moved. The world moved, and suddenly the entire market vanished for any phone that wasn't a small rectangular slab with a touchscreen. That became the new normal, yeah? But this is the apocryphal Henry Ford quote that he never said, which is if I'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. No one in any market research group would have said, I want a full touchscreen with no buttons. That was not a thing people said. Anyone who saw the first iPhone went, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, exactly that is what I want. Right? And it's the genius of someone like Johnny Ive is the obvious in retrospect. When you look at it in hindsight, you go, well, of course that was where the market was moving. You didn't know that, otherwise you'd have been there, right? So this is kind of the world. And so that's the goal when we talk about defining the goal. But let's look at the understand part of understand the goal. What does that mean? So what I do, and again, this is crazy and counterintuitive. So when I first work with an organization, I do a thing called an initial assessment. And an initial assessment is a lot like meeting lots of people. Okay? Over a couple of days, it's not a huge thing, a couple of days, I go and meet lots of people. And you never guess what I do with those people. Who wants to guess what I do with those people? Talk. Wrong. Listen. We're really, really good at talking. I'm not just a consultant, but I'm a consultant who speaks at conferences. I can talk the hind legs off any creature you can give me. Right? The real trick, and I was given this advice, is a two-part piece of advice. The first part is listen like you don't know the answer. We do a lot of we're not listening, we're waiting to speak. Right? We're waiting, and especially if you're speaking to an introvert, and this is a bit of psychology, introverts aren't quiet people, by the way. I know lots of very loud introverts. Introverts are people who recharge by going off on their own for a bit. Extroverts aren't loud people. Extroverts are people who energize by being around people. I'm extrovert. I'll speak now and I'll go and hang out with a bunch of people and I'll get energized by that. Other speakers here will speak, they'll go off and they'll be exhausted and they just want a bit of quiet time. Okay? But no, with introverts, there's a thing that happens. And the thing that happens is they tend to think before they speak. More so than extroverts who just start with words and decide they'll figure it out as they go along. Right? Both models are fine, right? They're just different. And the hilarious thing, not hilarious, is when you have an extrovert talking to an introvert, so the extrovert will say something, the introvert will pause, right, to gather their thoughts, at which point the extrovert goes, oh, my turn again, boom, like this. And this is one of the reasons that introverts get so exhausted. Listen like you don't know the answer. There's some great advice I had. So listen like, it is active listening, it's called. And the other part of this is this. If you're right, you'll still be right in 5 minutes. Right? So if you're wrong, you'll know, yeah? And you never said the dumb thing, right? So listen like you don't know the answer, and if you're right, you'll be right in 5 minutes. Take those two to the bank. If you hear nothing else today, I feel like I've added value. So I listen, and I ask, and again, it's not a structured interview. It's fairly loose, because I go where they take me. Douglas Adams, after he wrote the amazing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, they're coming for me. Okay, I better speed up. Okay, he wrote a series of books about a chap called Dirk Gently. And Dirk Gently is what he calls a holistic detective. They really are coming for me. Okay, we're good. Okay, they're not coming for me. Don't tell them I'm in the orange tent. Sorry? Say safely. Shh, shh, shh. So he has this detective, Dirk Gently. And he's a holistic detective, which means he believes in the interconnectedness of all things. It's very silly and very well plotted. But he solves crimes by believing in the interconnectedness of all things. And one of the things he does is what's called holistic driving. So holistic driving is he gets in the car and follows someone. And he follows someone until he sees someone else who looks like they know where they're going more, and then he follows them. Until he just gets somewhere. And he says, I never end up where I thought I was going, but I always end up where I needed to be. Right? And just such wisdom, yeah? So let someone else lead the conversation, and you end up where you needed to be. And it's never where you thought you were going. So what delights you? What frustrates you? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And what I'm listening for isn't what they tell me. I'm listening for the story behind the story. By the time you've had half a dozen of these conversations and people are telling you what delights them, what frustrates them, there will be a theme. There will be a common underlying thing or things of which these are all presenting symptoms. Right? The naive thing is to go after the problems they've got. But if you go after the thing that's causing the problems they've got, they all go, oh, and you get 6 of them, and you go, all 6 of you told me these different things. Yes. What about that? And they go, oh. yeah, if we did that, and suddenly they think you're insightful, and you're not, you're just really good at listening and practice listening. And then what I do is I play back what I've learned, and this is a 3-part thing. So the first part, I call it true consulting, which is give me your watch and I'll tell you what the time is. Okay? So you told me these things, this is what I heard. So not enormous value there, but it's a calibration thing. The second part is I say, if it was my company, tomorrow this is what I'd do. Here are some things you can just go and do. And then the third part is, here are some more probably involved things where you're going to want someone like me. And the great thing with this whole initial assessment is then they're in the driving seat. You're in the driving seat. You decide if you want to do the things on your own or to get me involved in some stuff or whatever. And then we decide where to start. But we decide where to start. I don't tell you where to start. We decide where to start. And of course, what often happens is they go, great, thanks for that list, let's go do it. With enormous enthusiasm, and you go, stop, you cannot fix all the things. So I called this, and I don't know if I invented this. I kind of feel like I heard it from someone, but I can't remember who. So if you come across another version of this, let me know. But I call it my rule of 63. And the rule of 63 is this, right? Wherever you land, anywhere, in a new job, in a new team, in a new part of an organization you already work in, but especially as a consultant, you land somewhere, you immediately see 63 things that you want to fix. Okay? And so the rule of 63 is this: pick 3, suck up the other 60. We know that the build is interminable, right? We know that this team is backstabbing this team. We know that there's, but none of that is the 3 things. So pick the 3 things, suck up the other 60. There's a link to a slightly longer version of this. And that's where we're going to start, those 3 things. And then it's all about, and I've done a series of talks with a wonderful lady called Anna Urbaniak, in fact, at Previous Crafts. She's my kind of delivery guru. She's unbelievably good at kind of program management and delivery management. And we talk about autonomy through alignment. So what does that mean? Autonomy through alignment is this: if we all understand the same rules of the road, then we can go where we like. You don't need someone directing the traffic. If we all drive on the left, then that's fine. If you all drive on the right, that's fine. It doesn't matter. What matters is we all drive on the same side. Otherwise, people die. Okay? Stoplight, we stop at a stoplight. We yield at a junction. Those things become the rules of the road, and then you have autonomy within those constraints. So the first thing I look for is vertical alignment. How can we get alignment up and down the organization? So what I want to establish buy-in from, I'm typically brought in somewhere in the middle or somewhere reasonably senior, like a head of engineering or something. But that person has peers. There's a head of product, or there's a head of security, or there's the CEO, or there's someone else. And there's a whole bunch of other stakeholders. And below them, typically there's a bunch of middle sort of program managers or product managers or whatever who own chunks of the estate. And then you've got people in teams. At each level in the organization, if you're doing it right, okay, you have a story about what's in it for me. It's not like suck it up and do what I tell you. Yeah? What's in it for me? If I can't tell you what's in it for me, I haven't thought it through. I shouldn't be out having the conversation yet. So that's homework for you. Right? If you can't say what's in it for me, think about what would bring that person on the journey. And now we've got some kind of alignment, we've got some kind of buy-in. Okay, look, and I always talk about experiments and prototypes. Let's just try an experiment. Let's just try a prototype. People, who's afraid of a prototype, right? If it's a prototype, we throw it out, yeah? So there's language you can use that makes things sound safer. And so I'll start small, or what in my world has become small, which is a program team. So around 50 to 100 people, okay? And that's typically a team of teams, but it's not like a whole portfolio of work. And around 50-ish people, maybe less, 30 people, but not more than about 100. That many people is an interesting problem to get pointing in the same direction. So original Agile methods, the Agile Manifesto Snowbird type, so Scrum back when it was a thing, right, before it became just a Ponzi thing, when it was actually game-changing, XP, DSDM, Crystal, Adaptive, FDD, there's a whole load of these methods that came into the room in Snowbird. Only 1 or 2 of them survive. Most of those things I just named, many of you won't have heard of, some of you will. All of them had the same idea in mind, which is how do I get a handful of people pointing the same way? Which you think wouldn't be a hard problem, right? Because we got so used to it being solved. But in the early 90s, it was a huge problem. And so getting 8 people pointing in the same direction is a solved problem. Getting 80 people pointing in the same direction is a bit more interesting. and then getting 800 people pointing in the same direction is substantively different again. So choose one program, start there, and then we federate this goal. I'm a huge, huge fan of OKRs. So and Andy Grove, who was the founder, I think, or certainly chief exec of Intel, came up with this idea of objectives and key results. I could talk about those at length, I won't. The main difference is this, is around the time, which would have been, again, late 90s, that most organizations had a thing called objectives. There was management by objectives, MBO. And the idea was that you'd set your objectives, and then at the end of the year, you're assessed against your objectives. And he said, that's brilliant. That is a recipe for mediocrity, right? How do you get your bonus? You lowball. You lowball, and then you hit it. If you're ambitious, if you set yourself an ambitious target, and you do amazing work, but don't reach that target, you lose your bonus. So what kind of behavior are we motivating there? So OKRs, please go and read how OKRs are done properly. Right? What's it called? Radical Focus is a fantastic book. Jeff Gotthelf's got some great stuff online about OKRs. But the idea is that they're measurable, they're exciting. Right? A really good OKR, the objective in a really good OKR sounds like a movie title, right? That's what it should be. And and also there's this belief that OKRs are about the product, market and competitors and blah. You can absolutely have objectives about ways of working. We can have one of my big American bank clients. We had an objective of halving lead time in a year. We had 400 people. We were going to halve lead time in a year for doing any work. And they were like, you can't possibly halve lead time in a year. And we did. Well, I didn't. They did, right? I just helped a bit. But they did all the work. And within a year, any work item, and we're talking like significant business change items, any business change item that went into the hopper of this part of the bank came through in half the time. And the following year, because they were getting the hang of it, they halved it again. Pretty cool. So the same people, same tech, same constraints, same everything else. They didn't throw it all out and start again. We're now delivering 4 times as much business change in the same amount of time for the same amount of money. That's not bad, right? So think about the cake and think about the method. This is up and down. Now let's think about horizontal alignment. How do you get horizontal alignment? You get horizontal alignment initially by all measuring the same stuff. And it sounds really dull, right? It sounds really dry. So I was working at, I can tell you, it's John Lewis. It's a big retailer in the UK. And they had about 100 people in the people who are doing like the website and mobile apps and all this for a retailer. And it was like multi-billion pound revenue retailer. And around, I think it's about 30 or 40% of their entire revenue was coming through online. So you've got 90,000 people working in this company, 3,000 in head office, 1,000 in technology, 90 in the whole of online, like this, right? Holding up this thing. And again, all pointing in different directions. So we did some work, got them all pointing the same way. And of course, Daniel's coming in to do some enterprisey stuff. And he's like, oh no, what's he going to make us do? And I was like, do what you like. We've got a bunch of teams here. Do you have to use Scrum or Kanban or Bart? Whatever works for you, do that. And they were like, really? I said, yes, except every 2 weeks, which on a 2-week cadence, I want to know 3 numbers. Throughput, that's how much stuff happened. How many things did you ship? That's throughput. Lead time, that's for each thing, how long did the thing take? Right, so on average, how long are things taking? And the third one is work in process. How many things are you as a team working on simultaneously? That's it. If you can give me those 3 things, go nuts. And some teams really struggle to give me those 3 things. And we help them. And other teams were like, we've got those numbers already, we just weren't looking at them. And suddenly at a program level, you had this metrics that said, this is exactly where we're going. This is what's going on. And we don't use it to compare teams with each other, because that's really toxic. We use it to understand the constraints of the system of work we built. Okay? And then we align people. And we align people, again, none of this is new. Joachim Sunden was doing this in Spotify in 2012. Right? The actual Spotify model is not tribes and guilds and squads and blah. The actual Spotify model is how do you scale an organization from 300 to 3,000 without it completely imploding? Right? If you're Spotify in Stockholm in 2012. So if you're Spotify in Stockholm in 2012, use it. It's really good. If you're not, it probably isn't the thing you want. All right, but someone will sell you it, don't worry. But what they did, which was brilliant, is they connected people. So all of the testers, or what I call the lonely roles. So in most teams, you have 1 or 2 testers, 1 or 2 business analysts or product, subject matter experts, 1 or 2 maybe security people or no security people. And these are lonely roles. And so those are the ones that are most likely to fragment, right? So we connected up all the testers into like a community of testers and all the other folks as well. But suddenly they had people like them to talk to. They had people to bounce ideas off. They had people to just yell into the void, right? And suddenly things like attrition plummeted. People stopped quitting because they thought they were in this helpless, hopeless place. And it turns out they had a bunch of buddies who they didn't know about. And we want to encourage collaboration on shared goals. So when you have teams working on different things, Steve Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about we generally have this idea of a scarcity mindset. So a scarcity mindset is it's a zero-sum game. We're fighting over a pie. Abundance mindset is let's make a bigger pie, okay? And then we explore some of those options. And the way we do that is with Deming cycles. John Willis is here, so I have to tell everyone that it's actually a Schuhart cycle, but everyone knows it as a Deming cycle, so I can tick that now, of plan, do, check, adjust. And what does that mean? That means experiments, okay? Now, here's the thing. We're rubbish at experiments. We all talk a good experiment game. We're rubbish at experiments, and let me explain why. So we're going to co-create this plan in our Deming-Schuhart cycle. As an experiment, what is an experiment? It has a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a thing we're going to test, okay? So we don't just start, we baseline. You all baseline, right, don't you? Yeah. No, you just start, don't you? You just start. And even those of you who have a baseline, you do also have a control, don't you? You have like another team or another part of the organization that no, you don't. No, we're rubbish at this, right? We're not scientists. We're not applying the scientific method to this. And the point of a hypothesis is it's a falsifiable statement. You don't set out to prove yourself right. That's really easy, right? It's really easy to pick particular samples that mean you're right. You set out to disprove yourself. Science is coming up with more and more ingenious ways to fail to falsify your assertion. And then do. And so I've been riffing on this acronym of VESPA. Okay, so what's VESPA? Very quickly, visualize, eliminate, simplify, practice, and automate. So let me unpack what that means. The idea with VESPA is it is sequential, and however far you get along this path, you did good. If all you manage to do is visualize stuff, you are miles further than you were before. If of all of that stuff you realize what's vestigial and you can get rid of it, brilliant, and so on. So what does visualize mean? Visualize means use whatever tools come to hand. Value stream mapping is a really powerful thing. Flow metrics, I already mentioned, the throughput and lead time. Wardley maps and purpose alignment model. Neil Nicolaisen, many of you will have heard of Wardley maps. I suspect many more of you won't have heard of purpose alignment. They're kind of, again, a lovely dual. So Wardley maps looks at your estate, your systems, your processes. Purpose alignment looks at your work, your backlog of work, if you like, or your portfolio of work in a similar way. What do we build? What do we buy? What do we outsource? What do we partner? Really powerful tools. Likert surveys, when they're done well, right? Academically defensible Likert surveys are enormously powerful. C4 models, Simon Brown's brilliant, very simple way of visualizing your architecture. And then some stuff that I've kind of either made up or co-created. Demand-led plans, I used to call it delivery mapping. Demand-led plans, we start with the demand and we build out the plan. Anyone who was at the FAST session yesterday, I have a similar thing to that. My thing scales better. FAST, I think you can probably get up and running with quicker. So again, it's trade-offs, right? Eliminate. Peter Drucker. I love this guy. Peter Drucker says there is nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency something that should not be done at all. Safe. And my absolute hero, Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, the most dangerous phrase, we've always done it that way. Why are we still doing this thing? Because we just do this thing. What happens if we stop doing this thing? Do you think we could? Simplify it, right? Of all the things that are left, we walk into a legacy system and we see this. Anyone, what is this? Anybody? Anybody? It's a wonderful, wonderful Heath Robinson model of course it's a potato peeler. Right? You knew that, right? You were just shy, yeah? And so you look at this, and I have what I call the CXO test. So the CXO test for process bloat. You look in the top of an organization, by law, you need 2 officers of the company, they're called. You need a chief executive officer, the person who's on the hook for decisions, and a chief financial officer who's on the hook for the money. Everything else is decorative. So you look at the CXOs, and it gives you the history of the organization. You have a chief security officer, you got hacked, right? You have a chief compliance officer, you got fined. You have a chief product officer, you got completely blindsided. We're not going to have that happen again. Yeah. Chief people officer, yeah, we got sued. Yeah, that happened. Right. And the bigger the board, right, the more of these things have happened, the more kind of organizational scar tissue. And then practice. So the point about practicing something is you do it again and again and again, right? And you do it again and again, cookie cutter, cookie cutter, cookie cutter, until it's boring. Once it's boring, now it's a candidate for automating. And also, once you've done something enough times that it's boring, every now and then you'll get a weird edge case. But that's fine, because I call this difference is data. By the time we've kind of normalized things, when I do see outliers, that's signal. If we don't do this, everything's signal. I've got no idea which of these different ways of doing stuff is significant, or is just what we did at my last place. Yeah? And finally, automate. And again, I just want to offer you this. Automate tasks, okay? So automate things that people do. So automate to help people. I was just having this wonderful corridor conversation about LLMs and where all that's going. And my prediction is this. When it all shakes out and the bubble bursts and all the money goes where it should go, the tools that will win, the technology, the applications of LLMs and so on that will win, will be things that help people work better. They won't be the things that replace people. They'll be the things that make it easier to do work. Calculators didn't replace accountants. They reduced all the mathematical errors, all right? Computers didn't replace secretaries. They made them much, much more effective, yeah? In the same way, LLMs won't replace humans. If they're done right, or the LLM tooling that we build on LLMs. And Eric Mayer has this wonderful model of LLMs as the new CPUs with the new computer language on top and et cetera. Automate the task, not the process. As soon as you automate a process, you bake it in. So I have this process, and the process is do A, then do B, then do C. Okay? And so we have this process, do A, do B, do C. And so I go, I can do that. I can write a workflow engine. I can make it do. And I pass that to Claire, who does this process, and she hates me. I just automated your process. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Because what I do is I do all the A's together in the morning, because that's an easy thing to do while my lizard brain is waking up, right? So I do all the A's this morning while the coffee's kicking in. Then the B's, I can't actually do the B's until Feo's in, and he's not in until midday. So when I batch up all the B's, and I go and check in with Feo, and we do all the B's, and that kind of, sometimes there's some errors with those. Meanwhile, I've got a couple of folks that help with the C's. You've now made me go A, B, C, A, B, C. So what do? I do one A, and I'm stuck. Because I've got to wait for Faye to come in so I can do the B's. And then I've got to do the C anyway, because I might as well. So you've just absolutely crippled my throughput by automating the process. Thanks. Yeah? Automate the steps. And Takeo Ono, this guy was kind of the architect, or one of the architects of the Toyota production system, the thing we now call Lean. He has this lovely term, automation. So automation is automation with a human touch. Machines don't build cars. People build cars with machines. Give people better machines, you get better cars, right? And he had this idea of if you want to build different cars, build machines that you can switch out very quickly to make different cars. And that's what they optimize for. So there's our Vespa, and we've got our little, of course, Vespa may or may not be a trademark elsewhere, I have no idea. I just quite like the little scooter logo, is all I'm saying. And now we're back into our Deming cycle of check. And we check against the goal. And again, I'll hand it to Takeo Ono. He has this lovely phrase, look with your feet, think with your hands. What does that mean? That means don't sit in your room poring over the reports or listening to your managers, blah. Actually go down to where the work is happening, right? And listen, right? Look with your hands, look with your feet, think with your hands. Actually get involved in the work, because that's the only way you're going to know. And now we've got that, we adjust. We're just based on evidence. And typically now we've done an experiment, or we've done one cycle of an experiment, and we look and we go, it's going really well, twist, let's keep going, let's play on, right? Or we say, actually, it is going okay, but we're probably, we're hitting a diminishing return now. Let's pause this thing, and then let's do the next experiment, right? That's a legitimate choice. Or you go, oh, crap. Oh, that shouldn't have happened. So, I mean, the thing probably happened, we managed to falsify it, or we had some dreadful unintended consequence, right? So we need to do a different thing. And then, so what do you do now? We've finished our cycle. You do it all again, is what you do, okay? And when you do it all again, you're asking yourself these questions. Are we still baking the right cake? This is our product management piece. Has the world moved on? Has the customer needs moved on? Has our understanding of how to meet those needs moved on? Are we still baking the right cake? Are we still baking it the right way? Right? What is the next most important thing to do in terms of our ways of working, our org structure, our leadership, our whatever it is? And is everyone still with us? The what's in it for me thing? There's a really easy test. And the really easy test, again, looking with your feet, is you just wander around and check the energy. And if you've got a bunch of people who just look checked out, there's a reason for that. They're checked out. Right? And that's on you. And I say this again and again and again to different people in different contexts. You do not manage people. Managers do not manage people. Managers manage a system of work that has people in it. Okay? If you hire brilliant people and they're struggling, you don't go after, if a plant is failing to grow, you don't go after the plant. You're like, right, we've hired this brilliant person and he's struggling. What are we doing wrong? How are we letting this poor person down? What do we need to do to make him happy again and bounce into work again? Okay? Do we still have everyone with us? So that's kind of it, right? So rules of the kitchen then, understand the problem. Don't just rock up with a solution, yeah? And all of these kind of solutioneering things, they say, right, I'm not going to listen to you. You need to implement X. With its cutesy job titles and ceremonies and stuff and handshakes and things. Listen like you don't know the answer, right? Because the people closest to the work know things you don't know. Why don't you just, because we tried that, is almost always the response to why don't you just stop, infantilizing me? Why don't you just stop treating me like a child and assume I'm quite good at this and I've tried all the things you're about to suggest, and then we'll figure out something together, yeah? Seek alignment, that vertical alignment, that horizontal alignment, connect people, get them with you. People are much more likely to listen to their peers than they are to listen to external hand-wavy person, right? So my job is to come in, create alliances, make friends, and get those people influencing the people around them. And you try these small, iterative, evidence-based changes, experiments. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't going to work. Some of them are going to surprise you at how well they work. Some of them you didn't even do. You hear about a thing over there that someone else, you're like, that's brilliant, I'm going to make that famous, right? Science is hard, right? Falsifying is hard. We have huge egos. Getting past that, genuine science is enormously humble. Genuine scientists are enormously humble. Has anyone read On the Origin of Species? Right? Charles Darwin's paper. So, fun fact, he didn't propose evolution. I think his dad did, actually. But evolution as an idea was well established by then. He didn't say, hey, evolution's a thing. We could see animals changing and things, and moths with different wings. What he proposed was evolution as the origin of species. So he says what happens is different creatures in different contexts eventually evolve locally such that they cannot interbreed. And at that point, you have different species, and we call it speciation. And it wasn't until hundreds of years later when we got to what's called neo-Darwinism and folks like Dawkins, who's a brilliant genetic zoologist and an utterly dreadful theologian, so there's that. But he came up with this idea of the selfish gene, and don't read the selfish gene, right? Read the extended phenotype. We just lost video. Read the extended phenotype is utterly, utterly brilliant. It's one of the best sciencey books I've ever read. I won't spoil it, but it's got spiders and webs in it, and figs and things. It's really cool. Hopefully we'll get something back in a minute. Yay! Oh, boo. Okay. I'll wait for it to come back and I'll speak really fast. So yeah, small iterative evidence-based changes. So anyway, why did I go off into Charles Darwin? Because if you read On the Origin of Species, he says things like, the thing is, I've got this really strong hunch about speciation, but I haven't been able to prove it. There's gaps, right? I haven't actually found genuinely different species, but I stopped by this place, Madagascar. Oh, it's cool. You get turtles. They got turtles, right? But so I've seen all this massive variegation, but I haven't seen genuinely new species, right? This is his magnum opus, and he's going. And he also has a little footnote going, origin of life, no idea, right? Origin of species is like you've already got your recursive function, right? But the initial recursive function, who knows, right? Very, very humble for an enormous, great work of science. And so there we go. So that was my talk. And then, be prepared to change the recipe, all of that, based on direction. So that was my talk. And this was 8 months ago. About 8 months ago. And what I decided I wanted to do was turn that into a thing, right? So there's me doing this and me talking about this, and I get very excited. What if I were to turn this into a product? So me as a service, as a product. And so I'm really terrified about this for the next 5 minutes. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this. I'm going to do this. This is an exclusive at Craft 2024. So I did it. It's called Goldwoods. Okay. It's at goldwoods.co. I am Daniel at goldwoods.co. It's hello at goldwoods.co. Goldwoods is me trying to articulate, frame, productize this type of organizational change, this type of business agility, where it is entirely centered around the customer, entirely centered around their needs, what they're trying to do, and I have no idea if it's going to work, right? But if you don't try, if you don't experiment, this might be a drop in the ocean, no one cares, this might blow up, this might be a thing that no one remembers. Anyway, you were here, okay? It's on video. And thank you for coming along. And I think John's about to tell me, King John is about to tell me we're out of time, right?
King is back on stage.
The king is back.
Congratulations on a well-done presentation and beautiful self-marketing. I love that. Once again, thank you for the speech. We have, so far, one question.
Okay.
Do you mind if I read it? That way you get
sure.
time to think about it. Given current economics, do you feel it's easier for you as a consultant? Are companies more open to consultants, or have they become...
The chopped off leg, yeah.
The chopped off leg, okay, wow.
So it's a good question. It's been a quiet year, I'm not going to lie. But it's interesting because, a bit of personal news last year, I adopted our second child. And while we were, overseas adoption, while we were overseas adopting, I get the news from my long-standing client that they want to, chop the leg off, whatever. And at which point I just went, that's cool, that's really good timing. I'm going to spend the summer hanging out with baby and dadding and stuff. And so I did. And so then I had a deliberately very quiet summer, and then I had a bunch of things that I thought were going to happen, and they took a while to materialize, but they are materializing, but it's definitely slower. But then also I don't have a baseline and I don't have a control, right? I just have a hypothesis. Because it was a 5-year engagement, and I was doing a lot of this kind of stuff, and I get all of my work's inbound. I don't know how to sell what I do, right, if people contact me. And so people had been contacting me, and it got quieter and quieter because I was just saying I'm busy. You spend 5 years being busy. So this was me just coming out of this period of not doing anything. But no, I'm getting inbound, I'm getting signal. I think... the wider question, and this is a lot of you folks are not consulting, you're internal, but you're internal influencers, right? You do an internal consulting kind of role, is to think about how you pitch that message, the what's in it for me, right? Oh, we can't afford to do this change thing. Well, maybe we can't afford not to do this change thing, right? If I can package this up in a way that is small experiments that pay for themselves, if at the end of the year we have been a net cost, stop it. If at the end of the year we have been a net benefit, why would you not continue investing in it? And this is the thing, is that there's this learned behavior, I think, or helplessness where, oh, we're going to get consultancy and it's going to cost a ton of money. Well, not if you do it right. If as a consultant, you're not saving more than you're costing, you're not a very good consultant, right? Or you might be a very good consultant not doing the right thing. So that's what I'd say. If, it's about positioning it, packaging it in a way that it should pay for itself very quickly, after which it becomes a much, much easier conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see that we have any more questions. Thank you again.